Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of the International Remote Viewers Association Conference here in Menlo Park, California. Our guest in this segment is John Brandenberg. John Brandenberg is a physicist. Yes. He spent years in the world of physics, as well as remote viewing, and is an author. Let's talk real quick about your journey into remote viewing through physics and how you got involved, with physics to begin with, what branch of physics you studied, and how that led into your world of remote viewing, John.
Well, I came into remote viewing before it was ever called remote viewing. I was raised in a very conservative religious household, and my uncle, William Surrey, had been part of the Manhattan Project, and I adored him. My father was a medical doctor, and we had my uncle who was part of the Manhattan Project during World War II, and I considered he was a magnificent, heroic figure. He climbed Mount Everest. He's been in Antarctica. So he was just a kind of Indiana Jones kind of character, in addition to being a physicist. And so I announced to my father at 11 years old that I wanted to be a physicist like Uncle Will. And my father said, "This is wonderful. I wanted you to be a medical doctor like me, but this is okay." And I said, "But I don't know what to work on." I was 11 years old. And I said, "Dad, I don't know what to work on." And he's painting planks for a fence he was putting up. So he's painting, and he just says, "Well, why don't you work on Einstein's unified field theory, unifying gravity and electromagnetism?" He says, that looks like a good problem, and Einstein worked really hard on it and, couldn't make progress, but maybe you will. So he assigned me this problem. In fact, he'd been a veterinarian's assistant. He says, "If you're a dog, it's good to have a big bone to chew on," he says. So I became determined. I felt it was God's destiny that I was going to become a physicist. That was the destiny He had appointed me. So I worked very hard to master, science and math in high school, and finally I went and got a bachelor's degree in physics. And then I ended up in graduate school at Lawrence Livermore National Lab at a special graduate school called Teller Tech. I managed to get into.
Wow.
And the leader, the kind of mentor of the whole school was Dr. Edward Teller. So I was part of the nuclear weapons lab kind of experience. We were working on fusion energy.
Oh, wow.
That was what I got my thesis in, and did my doctoral thesis in fusion energy. Worked for a marvelous fellow named Dick Post. And so at the time I was trying to be a real straight shooter. But something else had happened to me. My parents had decided to join a charismatic fundamentalist church, the Holy Gifts Pentecostal, Neo-Pentecostals. And I was skeptical, but I was their oldest child, and I was an oldest son. I was trying to show loyalty to my parents, whom I adored. I still do, even though they're passed on. And so even though I was skeptical, I embraced the whole movement. And things that you would, in this meeting, you would call parapsychology kind of phenomena, became just routine in my life. I would have dreams of things that would happen, and then they would happen. I would...
things beyond synchronicity.
Oh, absolutely. Things beyond synchronicity, and it became routine. Now, the other baggage of that movement was the Jim and Tammy Faye Baker kind of, and that was continual. Money, sex. And I kept thinking, and my fiance at the time, she was from a fundamentalist family, even though we weren't fundamentalists when we met each other, but we became them because, I became one and my fiance wanted to be one too. And I wanted to get through graduate school, and I kept telling her, "Look, we're poor right now. We're poor graduate students. I'm going to get my PhD. as quick as I can. I'm going to get a good job, and I'll buy you a nice house when we're done with this. And so I wanted to be as straight a shooter as possible. I'd been interested in UFO stuff before the Condon report came out, they closed down Blue Book.
Yeah.
And I just found it was kind of an unspoken thing in the physics community that I was joining, that you just didn't believe in UFOs, that it was all nonsense. And
well, I was going to ask, especially as a fundamentalist Christian, was there anything within your work of physics that conflicted belief-wise?
Well, actually, the thing that being a fundamentalist, you're setting yourself up for, as you get more and more education, there
could be a big tumble.
Several big tumbles.
Yeah,
and I finally I decided to just accept
even the cognitive dissonance of two different stories of creation up against each other can set you up for tumbles.
Absolutely. Chris, you have hit the nail right on the head. I managed to reconcile, and I began graduate school in 1975, as a fundamentalist. And by the time I was done 6.5 years later,
you were done?
I was done. And I was just an Episcopalian.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
An Episcopalian.
Where everything is always in committee.
Everything is done. So, as I said, somebody asked us what Episcopalians really believe, and I said, we have a committee study.
That's right.
They'll give a report, and we'll debate the report.
And decide.
But this is just very straightforward Christianity. But anyway, so I remain a Christian, a very strong follower of Jesus Christ. But at the same time, anybody who especially reads my science fiction knows that I know there's another side of life. In fact, I say, well, my stuff reads. The Bible has full of sex and violence, so sure. So is my science fiction.
Yeah,
because that's real life. And so anyway, and then my dear first wife, whom I still care for, she was part Native American, and she decided to embrace Native American religion. She decided to quit being a Christian, and that kind of ended the marriage, unfortunately. Christianity was the glue that kept the marriage together, and finally. But anyway, so I was trying to search, and that was an enormous blow to me. So I found my solace in physics. That was what comforted me and got me through the hard days of living through a divorce.
That's beautiful, actually, John.
Well, thank you. It was a beautiful thing. And we have this beautiful daughter who's now grown up and has given us two beautiful granddaughters, and I'm always concerned about them and the future they're going to face. So I work I've returned to work on nuclear fusion, control fusion, and now gravity modification, because I picked up where I'd left off on gravity theory, studying general relativity and Maxwell's equations and how to mix them together. You add an extra fifth dimension. If you take gravity equations, the equations that give you gravity equations, and then you add a fifth dimension to it that's kind of inert, you suddenly get gravity equations, general relativity, Einstein, and then you get Maxwell's equations. Equations they just fall out. It's magical. And Einstein helped get this published. He says, I don't believe this. This hidden dimension stuff. What kind of nonsense is this? He says, hidden dimensions. And then he says, but it's the mathematics is so interesting. I'm going to help you get it published. So it's Kaluza-Klein theory. And it was the foundation of string theory. String theory is now being dismissed as a religious cult. Slightly, in
a few ways.
But if you just concentrate on the two long-range forces of nature, gravity and electromagnetism.
Absolutely.
And Hal Puthoff has been working very hard on this also, and he's partly my great inspiration that I was on the right track, because his theory has a lot of overlap with mine.
Yeah.
We found that, if space-time, gravity is the curvature of space-time, if the fabric of space-time is electric and magnetic fields, electromagnetism, then gravity and E&M are already kind of unified. And he has been working on that model, and so have I.
Well, and it's something that we talk about regularly on this show is the idea that we only experience and see as human beings a very slender slice of the actual spectrum that is the universe.
We see the visible
it's like
spectrum.
100, possibly 100.
It cuts off in the ultraviolet and it cuts off in the infrared because that's the window where water is transparent and our eyeballs are full of water. And that is the reason we see the visible spectrum, the rainbow, is because, and that is miraculous.
Yeah.
They don't understand why water is black as ink in the infrared, black as ink in the ultraviolet, and just has a narrow band where you can see for miles through water, clear water.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful place called Crater Lake. Everyone should go see it.
And even magnifying properties and everything else within that range. It's incredible.
In Crater Lake, the water is pure snow water, and it's so clear. You can look down 100 feet and just see it gets bluer and bluer. And then finally you're looking down 100 feet through 100 feet of water as if it was just window glass.
Now, was it your experience in physics, nuclear physics, things like that? Because, of course, by all rules of physics right now, not only are we sharing an electron shell, but we're sharing one with somebody in Peru.
Yes, we are.
None of this is physical reality. It's actually just a repulsion of electrons by all means of physics.
There's what's called quantum coupling of systems, and if you believe the general relativity, we began with a singularity, an infinity, the Big Bang, and everything is correlated through quantum mechanics from that moment on. So every electron actually is connected to every other electron and proton in the universe by that. And they all share the same space.
And it's at that point in the lesson of physics here, John, that I would like to bring in the world of remote viewing. And was it because I think that is what really sets the scene for the concept of remote viewing. Whether you believe in precognitive remote viewing, whether you're a protocol follower of remote viewing, I think that whether it's the parapsychological or ESP period, even going into the work of Caroline Corey in her movie Superhuman, it's all frequency, and it's all about frequency shift. The same way that Hal Puthoff was talking about yesterday, the blue shift of these objects energetically is what causes the light emission from them. And what causes radiation burns, what causes experiences like the Cash Landrum incident.
Cash Landrum, very familiar with that.
Same here, my family's from Kennefic, Texas, so literally right down the road. It's interesting to see how
complete with government helicopters.
Yeah. And how did your work in physics open your mind to the concept of remote viewing as we know it now, and the study of that?
Well, what happened to me is I'd become an Episcopalian, which is a far more broad-minded Christianity, where
considerably more allowable.
As a fundamentalist, you think you know everything. You think you read the Bible and understand every verse, or especially what the pastor tells you is...
There's a considerable box that you can even scientifically put yourself in, and not with Schrodinger.
Not with... Schrodinger and his cat are nowhere to be seen in this box.
Absolutely not.
And so being an Episcopalian is kind of free and easy. There's no snap exams on what you actually believe in detail. It's just basic Christianity, and it doesn't try and pose scientific theories as part of the. So what happens? So my view of Christianity became much broader, and what also happened was I became aware of there's a lot of physics that people don't like to talk about in the physics community. The physics community is no different than any other community. If they understand something really well and they can predict things, they like to talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask if your opening of your spirituality actually opened your mind scientifically to new concepts.
It did. It did very much because when you get away from the fundamentalist movement, suddenly you realize I know next to nothing about anything.
Yeah,
and
that your knowledge is probably right there in the visible spectrum.
It's in the visible spectrum. And there's all the ultraviolet, the RFs, the microwaves. You're missing all of that. So what happens in some of the explorations of physics, like they found out that if you have Richard Feynman, and Wheeler worked out a theory. They wanted to just track the motion of a single electron in free space. And they found that if they did not, the electron moves along, and as it wiggles, it releases radio waves. That's part of it releases electromagnetic, and that goes forward in time. We're used to that. What they found is that unless you include backwards in time, in other words, messages from the future, every electron, as it turns out, is an oracle of the future. It's receiving messages not only from the past, what happened in Alpha Centauri 4 years ago, it's receiving what's going to happen in Alpha Centauri in 4 years. And that was causality goes right out the window when you do that. And you can't, they found that they could not analyze the motion precisely of a single electron.
Because it's unpredictable.
Yes. And it's getting messages not only from the past, things that have happened in the radio waves that were emitted there, and then they've come and are making this electron move. The electron is getting messages from the future.
Even the concept that the electron is conscious, because it has to know that it's being observed in order to be photographed or watched.
That's
the
metaphysical problems of quantum mechanics.
It's mind-numbing to think about.
Oh, it is, and I'm trained as a plasma physicist. We tend not to worry about quantum mechanics, but of course, then when I got into unified field theory,
there's a little bit
quantum mechanics is staring me in the face. Can't. In fact, that's the reason Einstein was so frustrated. He didn't believe in quantum mechanics. He rejected it.
Yeah.
He said God doesn't play dice with the universe. But
quit telling God what to do.
But then you finally. And I wrote this in a book. I wrote a book on metaphysics called Cosmic Jesus. I was trying to explain to fundamentalists that the extraterrestrial life doesn't violate the Bible.
Absolutely.
It's in fact it's deeply compatible with.
It's the Bible. More compatible than anything else. Even the Catholic Church has come out and said that.
I know that. That's because they read the Bible in Greek. Everybody else reads the fundamentalists read it in King James. And so what happens is. You have, so I wrote this book and I said, God may not play dice with the universe, as Einstein said, but he does own a casino.
He is the house. He is the house.
He is the house. And you then ask, how did he end up owning this fine casino? And that's a story in itself I'm not going to get into. But what happened is that you finally, your feelings of spirituality and kind of what you call parapsychology merge with these things on the very frontiers of physics. The Wheeler-Feynman discussion basically says every electron in your brain is receiving messages from the future. So no wonder some people who are sensitive to that can pick up those images.
And even how we are starting to discover now that some people have allergies to RF. Yes. Some people are incredibly in tune to that.
Well, we're filling the air around us with all sorts of Wi-Fi,
absolutely,
broadband, 5G, everything.
Buildings actively showing fatigue 20 years early from Wi-Fi.
Well,
things like that.
it's not gamma rays, but it is electromagnetic radiation, and it shakes.
It's vibration.
It's vibration. So
you're vibrating things around you millions of times per second.
And I became also fascinated with science fiction because I realized that science fiction writers seem to be taking images and dialogue from the future and turning it into novels. There's like Jules Verne, Voyage to the Moon. They launched their ship from Florida.
Yeah.
The ship is made out of aluminum, which in those days was more precious than gold. When he wrote Earth to the Moon, it's almost the same dimensions as the size of the command module for Apollo you saw on Apollo 13.
Absolutely.
And so science fiction writers, that's kind of my method of doing RV, is I get stories and images, dialogue, and I write it down. And so I wrote a novel called The Collapse of the UFO Cover-Up. And then also my most recent novel, which is the final of a cycle of 5 novels involving the same characters and their life stories, is called The War of the Singularity, because I was exposed to the people believing that they're going to create these super intelligent AIs, and the language of, words to me are very important. Words have deeper meaning than just what they sound like.
It was all spoken into being.
It's all spoken into being. In the beginning was the Word, and the words. So their words are important in the Bible. And so it's the logos, as they call it in the ancient Greek. And so I was recuperating from getting COVID. I almost died. By the grace of God, I'm still here, and the prayers of my friends. And I mentioned my former sister-in-law. She's basically my sister. So she's a beloved person. She's a shaman, and she saw when I was unconscious in the hospital. I was in a coma. She saw me walking down a corridor in the hospital toward the light, and then being turned back.
Oh wow!
And then she couldn't be down in Texas, but she was hearing constantly how I was doing for my family, because our families became very close, and she's kind of adopted part of the family, or part of my family. And she said, right after I had that vivid dream, I heard you were getting better. You'd recovered. You'd woken up from the coma.
Wow.
And we were asking, how did I get here? Where's my car?
Now, in our last few minutes, Joe, because we do have to get ready for lunch here in just a minute, I'd like to talk about your experiences remote viewing, especially the fact that in the world of UAP disclosure, things like that, even disclosure of directed energy weapons that the government has denied for years existed.
Oh, yes. Well, I worked on all of that stuff.
Well, it's one of those things that, like I told you before the interview, we have quite a community of targeted individuals on this show. And to see now that Havana syndrome is being recognized, despite the fact that we used microwave-activated bugs in embassies across the world since 1968.
They probably showed it to some guy in some departments, some compartment, and then he said, "Oh yeah, we've seen this before."
Remote viewing wise, what do you see for as far as disclosure with UFO UAP technology? Is it the fact that it's us gaming our technology against known quantitatives of our own technology?
No. We're
from recovered technology, of course.
As a scientist, I have to believe in extraterrestrial life simply because
the numbers are there.
The numbers are there, and there's nothing. We've found many clones of Earth. There's certainly stars like the sun out there. And we're going to start finding as our telescopes get better. we're going to start seeing oceans on other planets.
Oh, absolutely.
And once you see an ocean, it's alive.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing you'll spot, when you come into the solar. But like when I first, I rejected all the UFO stuff because I was trying to be a straight shooter. I got involved in Mars work, which is extraterrestrial intelligence and the ruins of a dead civilization. Found out there was nuclear weapons signature on Mars. I was told that by nuclear weapons people.
Wow.
And I reported it to the Pentagon.
We've got to have you. That's a whole episode in and of itself.
That's a whole episode.
That's wow.
But and quite frankly, when I reported it to the Pentagon, they sat on it for 6 weeks, and they got back to me through channels. And they said, "Publish." They told me publish it.
Wow.
Yes. So,
wow.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's
incredible.
factions that want disclosure to happen. They want the human race, fundamentalists and everybody, to get used to the idea we're not alone.
And that's why the 9 theologians were a big part of the NASA study that was funded.
Oh, well, and I'll tell you also something. One of the most vivid remote viewing experiences I had was when the people who were interested in Mars were also a lot of from the UFO community.
Yeah.
Because it was evidence for extraterrestrial intelligence. And so I suddenly got funneled all of this stuff, like John Lear's secret history about the UFO, and the MJ-12 documents arrived through my door slot. I was terrified because they were marked classified. So I went and actually tried to turn them into the FBI, and they wouldn't take them. They told me, they're junk, destroy them. And I said, well,
I don't think so.
I don't have authority to do that. In fact, it was a woman, I was talking on the phone with the FBI, local FBI office in Washington, D.C. I was down at the J. Edgar Hoover building I said, look, I got the stuff in the mail. This looks deeply classified to me, and I got it in the mail. Take it. And they said, oh, no, we can't take it. We don't have the safes for it. We don't have the proper facilities to store material like that. And I said, this is crazy. And so this woman was following me with this clipboard taking notes. And she said, call the local FBI office and see if they'll come and pick it up. The local Washington, D.C. So I got on the phone and I called the local, and I said, I got these look like classified documents in the mail. I don't know what to do with them. This is a breach. Their markings look like they're compartmentalized top secret. And the guy says, what do they talk about? And I said, it's a briefing for the president's eyes, crash flying saucers. The guy says, oh, they're junk. You're junk. Burn them. Throw them away. And I said, no.
Oh, my gosh.
I turned to the lady with the clipboard, and I said, these people are not going to come pick this stuff up, and I am not leaving this building with these documents. And she had her clipboard, and she was writing. So I dropped all of the stuff on her clipboard, and then I walked out of the building like this, backwards.
Wow.
Hands up. Don't try and give them back to me. They sent them back to me through the mail.
Wow.
Saying, we've examined these documents. No program that we have jurisdiction over seems to have been violated.
Oh.
I thought, oh, my God.
That you have jurisdiction over.
And one of the really vivid remote viewing things it was all about Roswell. And I kept getting this image of this very teardrop-shaped gun turret with 450 caliber machine guns sticking out of it. And I kept thinking, why do I get obsessed with that image? And then I finally realized from my younger days as a model airplane builder, plastic models, when I was a kid. It's the roof turret for a Black Widow night fighter. So they lost 2 UFOs over 2 saucers over Roswell. It's now been, one crashed near Roswell, the other crashed about 100 miles away, Socorro. And you think, and all of the nuclear weapons on Earth were stored at Roswell at the time.
Yeah.
All 5 nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
With the bombers to carry them. And the guys at the base knew nothing about the UFO thing. But I kept getting this image of this teardrop turret And I realized, oh, it was a shoot down.
Wow.
And the turret belongs to an airplane called the P-61 Black Widow. It was painted jet black. And you probably had veteran crews from World War II. World War II had only ended 2 years before. And they had them orbiting Roswell. That's my theory. And when I saw that, suddenly I realized the whole plane that went with it, I thought,
wow,
that's why you would lose you send this stuff from 40 light years from here to investigate all our nuclear weapons on Earth stored at Roswell and lose 2 saucers in one night.
Yeah.
That's, as the heroine in my novel says, losing 1 saucer, that's a tragedy, but losing 2 begins to look like incompetence.
Yeah.
She's very cerebral. She's Asian American and thinks, she's very thoughty.
Well, John,
her blonde friend is, they really screwed up. and they find out that they find the crew this is in my novel.
Yeah.
So I put it in the novel. But I still think and I got that vivid image of this teardrop shaped turret, and it was a very effective night. It had a big radar dish in the nose.
Yeah.
Most people are not aware of how advanced our technology got towards the end of World War II.
Yeah. Rapidly.
Very rapidly. And they were based out of Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, about 100 miles away from Roswell. So they would have been orbiting.
Yeah.
Guarding our nuclear weapons stockpile.
Wow.
And because they were seeing UFOs everywhere. And the person who wrote The Day After Roswell, I can't remember what his name is. But anyway, he talked about that the U.S. government marshaled all its counterintelligence forces. They knew we were under surveillance. They treated it as a military threat. And so they had all this stuff concentrated in Mexico to guard Roswell.
Wow.
They were guarding it. And so this is what happened, I believe. But imagine if you find out in one moment, not only are people here scoping out our nuclear weapons, they're scoping out how strong we are, what kind of nuclear weapon, but they're not bulletproof. They're not bulletproof. So this aura they trying to make that we're so advanced, we're invincible, that's not true at all.
A facade.
It's a bluff. It's a bluff. They're bluffing.
Well,
and one of the reasons we're still having this conversation is, I believe, is that we developed this enormous stockpile of nuclear weapons during the Cold War. And according to the guy who wrote The Day After Roswell, I can't remember his name, but he said one of the reasons the Russians and the United States both built such enormous stockpiles, enough to make every city on Earth destroyed 10 times over.
Oh, yeah.
Was to prevent an invasion from outer space.
Wow.
The house was wired with dynamite. Come on in.
Yeah. Feel free.
Sit down on the sofa, while I adjust this wiring. And, so there at least was... Most of the universe is very friendly to us. That's what I've heard. Views us either with amusement or benign indifference. But there's a few other species out there that actually would like this planet because it's a beautiful little planet with lots of water. It's very fertile. And so the government has had to deal with an extraterrestrial threat.
Wow.
Existence classified. That's all I know. And I wrote it as science fiction.
Well,
I wrote everything I wrote a science fiction novel where I incorporated a lot of stuff I'd heard as rumors around the coffee machine and in the hallway when I worked for the various space intelligence agencies. And I actually asked them, I said, I'm going down to Florida to teach at University of Central Florida, and I'm giving up my clearances because I don't want to be in a university environment and have all these top secret clearances.
Yeah, I have to be read into everything.
Oh, I can't take that responsibility.
Yeah.
And and I said, but I heard some interesting stuff around the coffee machine. I was wondering if you would mind if I put it into a science fiction novel. And to my surprise, they said, Well, sure, John. We always liked your reports. If you write a science fiction novel about this, as long as it's science fiction, labeled as science fiction,
that's it.
We'll be We'll read it.
Well, let everybody know where they can go to get their copy of The War of the Singularity, where they can go to find out more about your life, your work, your research, everything else, John.
Chris, well, it's a great. Thank you for interviewing me.
Absolutely.
This novel, The War of the Singularity, is the last of a cycle of novels involving the same three characters. It's a love-hate triangle. It's this little soap opera, you know. I've become very concerned about this AI research aimed at trying to make a super intelligent computer, and people are talking about uploading themselves into this computer.
Yeah.
And this is the singularity, and the singularity. People say, "Oh, Brandenberg, you don't know anything about computing science. You're just a user of computers." And I said, "Well, the whole concept of the technological singularity that concept comes from a physicist, not a computer science geek."
Yeah.
And he viewed it would be he had lived through the Holocaust and World War II and the birth of the hydrogen bomb, you know, mutual assured destruction. His name is John von Neumann. He came up with the concept of technology, and he viewed it would be a catastrophe for the human race. That civilization as we knew might end.
Yeah.
And the AI community has picked this up as a buzzword. They don't really know its origins, and they don't know its implications.
Yeah.
And so I've written this book, which explores a nightmare scenario in the future involving AI. So,
and the book is available where?
Amazon.com.
All right.
And I wrote it as I saw it. I was like I was seeing a movie. I was seeing all these strong images, dialogue, and I wrote it down. And it's a possible future. It's not. We're facing possible alternative futures.
We've got a lot of choices in front of us right now.
I myself am an optimist. I believe the future will look like Star Trek. Singularity be damned.
Yeah, yeah.
The human race is going to be like Star Trek.
Yeah.
And either the original or Next Generation or both. I had a crush on Lieutenant Uhura. She was, in the early ones. And, I like Nurse Chapel too, but and then of course they have that gorgeous woman who's the psychic on Next Generation.
Yes.
And Captain Picard, of course, doesn't have any hair like me, so that's good. He's made bald look sexy.
That's it.
And I very much enjoy those things, and I believe that will be what the human future looks like. Well, including Data, who's a benign piece of artificial intelligence, and he feels angst. Yeah, just like any human being. That's right. He's not just a machine. Yeah. He's much more than that. And I believe that's what the future will look like for the human race, especially because we will actualize that. We will